Yes, let's get right into it here. There we go. Hey, a little rusty. I clicked on the one that didn't have a counter on it. Of course I did. How's it going? Did you miss me? As always, Nate Mumford, Director of Sales Engineering here at RCS. Time for another RCS Live. That's right. We are back post summer vacation over here, getting back on all those tips and tricks. Of course, don't forget it's the same RCS Live, except they just moved all of my little navigation icons around here. So, for example, you can always check out our past videos over on the archive over at rcsworks.com/rcs-live. We're going to be out and about. We're going to be at IBC next week. And then we're going to be, let's see here, we got coming up in the fall. We're going to be the College Broadcasters. That's going to be in the end of October. I'm actually headed to Alaska for the Alaskan Broadcasters Conference as well. We're doing a lot of great events over there during that conference, a lot of tips and tricks as well. So we're going to be in the Alaskan area. Going to be in the Alaska area. Let me know. We'll stop by and talk about, GSelector, Zeta Cloud, or whatever you want to talk about. Like like a new product, like something like a audio display or whatever, that type of thing. Hey, Nate, did you mumble there a little bit? Because yeah, I did. So here's what we're going to do for the new format of these RCS Lives. We're going to do it at the top of the month. We're going to do, our products, tips and tricks and all that good stuff. And then I'm going to alternate that with some, videos from the archive. And then about the second or third week in the month, we're going to do a brand new product that we're going to talk about that's going on the pipeline as well. We have a couple of those in the mix. So I wanted to save those for their own special showcase. And you'll see those on our socials, either on YouTube or Facebook, whatever. You'll see us announce those as well. The first one's going to be in September, is going to be the brand new RCS Academy for Acquira. That's going to be the goal for about 2 weeks from today. Same time, 11 a.m., all that good stuff. As always, I have my chat open. Hey, what's up, Mark? How's it going? Thanks for checking in. Long time no speak, Mark. And so, yeah, let's just dive right into it. And today we're talking about GSelector more specifically. This came from a couple of our users, and we were kind of chit-chatting. I guess in the field right now, there's a growing need for just variations, some variables, but from my perspective, almost like overrides the traditional schedule. And so the idea is that this came from a couple of users. And I thought, well, if more than one user is asking for this type of workflow, we might as well talk about it for our RCS Live. Yeah. Oh, but before I forget, don't forget, always looking for beta users and also backups. Check your backup paths as well. That's always a good thing to say. That's my little disclaimer as I get into the little housekeeping over here of GSelector. So listen, so the example here was we have our typical programming, and usually on the weekends or some specific day part, there's a couple songs they don't want to play, right? It's very specific. So I was always talking about the very generic, go to the goals and go to the balance, and then go to, let's say, maybe the categories or something like that. And again, the drop down for the day part right here, you can always expand this. There's something like songs. We go to balance and songs instead. And for example, if there's a song here that you don't want to play during this day part, you can just ban it like that. And it's not going to play during that day part. Same thing applies for any kind of attributes, right? I'm not going to save my changes there. I'm going to jump to attributes and go over here to, let's say, a sound code. If there's a sound code you don't want to play at night, maybe like a tempo of 1 or something, just ban it just like that. That's all I did there. And that's all fine, except for the example that was provided to me was, well, it kind of bridges the gap of the day part, and it's kind of only an hour or two inside that day part. So I thought we would talk about day parts versus our restrictions, and more specifically, how to create an attribute to isolate what you want to achieve. Remember, I have the archive over here as well. Man, they collapsed all these navigation tools on me here. There we go. Where am I? Oh, there's music. I don't need music. Thank you. But you have this archive right here, right? rcsworks.com/rcs-live. So the idea is that you want to isolate something in GSelector to control it, to exploit it based on your music philosophy. That's the idea here. So let's start by going to the setup. I'm not going to save my changes. And you can see here, setup and day parts. We have the definition and assignments. Now, question for you, right? Notice I said setup and day parts, not setup, station, with all these configurations. So what does that tell you about day parts? Huh? It means that these are the day parts assigned to everybody. This is what's going on. So just be aware, these are global day parts. At that point in time, we have AM drive midday, PM drive night overnight. And you'll notice I create a special little RCS live day part right here. Now, it's not assigned. There's no check mark there. So I'm going to just use this for controlling purposes, but obviously it's not part of the schedule just yet. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm here to the chat is open as well. I got Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter Live, all that good stuff. Is even X Live? Do you even know if that's connected, Corey? Anyway, so we have here, this is my day part. Now you'll notice there's a couple settings here for group and for region. Just to refresh yourselves on those, you'll notice I have these groups here, 1, 1, 1, and 2, and then an RCS live. What grouping does is it essentially allows you to schedule an attribute or a technique and combine it into all day parts. Typically, an average user would just have essentially a generic, kind of day part and maybe use the copy to day parts function in the goals. But if you find yourself always doing that, everything is really the same, then you want to group these together, and you only have to do it once, because when you make the save to one, it saves to the rest of the group. Now, when I was a PD, I had a top 40 hot AC hybrid. And so I purposely had a morning drive that was isolated, middays and afternoons that were combined, and then nights and overnights were combined to further isolate and easy control of all my goals and my rules. But you can do whatever you want here. But that's what the grouping does. If the name's the same, they're grouped together. The region's going to give you those kind of A's and B's. Some of the users like regions for weekends. The classic example there is going to be, if I'm a PD, I'm going to ask you this question. On Friday at 3 p.m., if I play Happy Birthday, then on Saturday at 3 p.m., I play Happy Birthday. Do you care? Notice how I'm not saying me, it's you. Do you care about that? If you don't care that's playing in the same hour, then you might have regions where the weekend's different region from the main one during the week. And then, of course, where there's no conflicts between things like yesterday, same hour, and so on. However, if you are like me, I do program based on a 7-day schedule. So I know, for example, I like moving day parts. So if at Monday at midnight the song plays, they might have a turnover of 1 day and 7 hours. I don't want to lose that 1 day, 7 hours by a second region, because I have that math slotted with the staircase pattern. I want to maintain that across the board. So me personally, I don't like regions, but I totally understand and respect it. And that's the example there. If I have, let's say, yesterday, same hour between Friday and Saturday, versus another example there is Saturday and Sunday. Right? If you think of Saturday at 3 p.m. and Sunday at 3 p.m. are the same exact hour, then yes, you might want to combine the regions for the weekend. And you can do that under the day part over here. This is your typical 24/7 day part grid. Nothing too complex there. All you're seeing here is essentially the day part parentheses, the actual day, so on and so forth, right? So that's what it's doing over here. So just be aware, some users, we're talking really about those specialty shows like that Saturday overnight, and just going over here and assigning that and say something like an RCS live day part, right? Just boom, something like that. I'm not going to save my changes for right now, but that's what really we're talking about here, right? We have the entire day, the entire week, but just this one little section here, we have some various different types of programming. And that's what you want to do, right? You kind of want to go and isolate this depending on what you have. Examples here are Saturday night mix shows, Saturday night different formats, Sunday morning jazz, acoustic brunch shows, and things like that. Again, you're asking yourself, if a song plays here versus there, do you care about some of those cross references between day parts? That's the biggest thing. So if you look over here, you might see, I'm gonna cancel my changes really quickly, but you'll notice that, like, for example, I have my midday starts at 9 a.m. and PM drive starts at 2 p.m., something like that, right? And where if I go to my my hours here, set up in hours, you'll see I have a couple, just two generic little hour grids over here. And yes, by the way, if you have drive protection, the Friday at 5 p.m. doesn't play at Monday at 8 a.m. That type of drive protection That's right here. Just a little friendly reminder for you. And so we're talking about hours. Now, you'll notice that I said a 9 to 2 for the midday and the afternoon, but the afternoon went to 6 for the PM drive. And you notice that I have this at work only type of attribute. So it's not going to play during the X's. It is going to play when it's open. This is a 9 to 4. But the 5 o'clock, wait a second, Nate, isn't that 5 o'clock part of the PM drive? It sure is. So if I have a link, because remember, same thing applies to linker as it does for selector and GSelector and the songs. If I go over here to my goals and I ban the tempo of 1 for that particular, in this case, the afternoon drive, PM drive, yeah, that's going to include those hours, which is not technically what we want to do here, right? That's not the goal. So we pivot to essentially hour restrictions. Now, what I'm seeing more of in the user case example here, we're talking about differences between day parts and hour restrictions, is, again, we have that type of program where, hey, I'm going to deviate slightly because of based on the day part, based on the format. You might see this more on some of those top 40 hot AC hybrids or some of those more hot stations where you can get away a little more aggressive music at different hours of the day. Think of it as, for me personally, it was the dentist office at noon versus like Saturday night. You know, do I want to play like on a hot AC, safe AC, like a hot in here at like 12 o'clock, or a Nicki Minaj or a Cardi B at like 12 o'clock on a Wednesday? Maybe, maybe not. But when you look at Saturday night at 8 or 9 p.m., yeah, we're going to throw some Cardi B in there. That's good. That's what's going to happen. So you have some variations here. And what we're seeing from my perspective with programmers is the need to really start to control some of those day parts and then exploit them. So you might notice that off the bat, yes, you know, if I go to the goals over here and I pick one of these attributes, I do have the rotation rules window right here. And from this rotation rules window, I can control a whole bunch of stuff. Don't forget the show assigned values here as well. So I can say something like show me all. And then, of course, there's the grouping there. The ones I talked about. Notice how it's 1 midday PM drive night versus 2 overnight versus the RCS live, which has its own RCS live variation day part on top of that. Remember, you can control all of these things. Look at all of this. Don't be intimidated by this screen. Shout out to Stan over in support. We love working in this. And this is a thing that's supposed to give you power, give you control of what you want to do. But yes, there's no hour restrictions here because at the end of the day, you know, this is based on the day part and what's allowed to play. So from my perspective, when I teach this to users, we're talking about songs here, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about songs. We're talking about links. We want to control those songs, control those links. So if a song is allowed to play or not allowed to play during those hours, not the day part, but the hours, how can we control that across the board? So now I'm going to dive into how to manipulate some of those songs in a couple different ways based on your kind of your music philosophy, if you will. So the first thing is we go to our library, go to our browse. And what I created here was a content rule, the RCS live attribute. And I kind of made this generic because I really want you to think of this as I'm isolating something. What is that something? Is it an attribute? Is it a type of song? Remember, I try to empower you to think of things like the Nate song, which is a variety song that establishes the tone of your station. If you're programming 4 stations and they're 4, let's say, classic rocks, but one is a little more of an active rock than, let's say, a safe classic rock, then that attribute might be active rock songs. Isolate them into an attribute like content. Then take those attributes, assign them to songs, and then manipulate, exploit those transitions. That's what I'm talking about right here. So very simply put, I have my browse list. Remember, we can sort this A to Z, Z to A, all of that good stuff. If you're like me, you're always running around, especially as a program director. And so I might have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And so I highly encourage you to find ways, be proactive in setting benchmarks and timeframes when you're doing a non-normal task. So in this scenario, I am creating this attribute, the RCS Live attribute, and assigning it to songs. Here's a great pro tip. Sort by either title or artist and note where you are. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pick some songs. So you're going to be one, you're going to be one, you're going to be one. Okay, you're going to be one. Hey, what was that? Oh, do you need me over there in the studio to do? Oh, I run out of time. I got to do a live appearance. Great. Where did I leave off? I left off at Charlie Puth. Charlie Puth left off. Put a post-it note on your monitor and you can save this browse list, right? So we'll save this and we'll call this RCS Live attributes. Great, sounds good. And now moving forward, when I come back to my GSelector, I have right here, notice the RCS Live attribute. Boom, there are my songs. I knew I left off at Charlie Puth. Now let's keep going, continue that list, right? It's a great tip if you're doing like A to Z weekends, themed weekends, whatever it could be, and you're just not there yet and you get distracted. Make a note, but it all starts by filtering your library with that header column. Otherwise, you're having filtered by something. You don't know what it is. You're going to forget some songs that you need. So at this point in time, how many songs do we have? Mark, how many songs we got? 4. 4 songs right here. Yep, 4 songs. If I go to my multi-song changer, how many songs do we have? Look at that. 4 songs. Best practices. Make sure those numbers match. You don't want to assign an entire library to a particular attribute. So now we just go back to our basics, multi-song changer. There's a little plus over here. From that drop-down, we have the at work only or the test. We can do an at work only. We can save these changes, take a backup, and go from there. Again, for time purposes, I'm just going to clear these changes for right now. And now we're going to continue on that process. So now we established our day parts. We established our hour restrictions. We established the attribute. We created that first. We assigned it to a song. We took all these songs and we can have the collected attributes there. So now how do we exploit this, right? So now we can go and simply say, well, all these songs have our restrictions. They won't play during that particular hour, and we call it a day, right? That could be something like jumping back to hour here, setup, hours, hour grids. I'm going to go ahead and let's say create a brand new one and call this RCS Live 2. And I'm just going to say, hey, this can't play anywhere except for Saturday at 8, 9, 10, and 11. Something like that, right? So I'm going to save this and boom, done. There's my RCS Live grid, right? So now those songs can't play until they're here. There's also alternate categories too, by the way. You can always do that. Go to setup, station, features, was it balance? Alternate category. So, I highly encourage you to do that too. The difference with alternate categories versus main ones is you got to add those rules in place and those values. And some people, it's just an extra step and they just don't feel like doing it on the fly and save some time. So the hour restriction does the same exact behavior. But now I have that scheduled. We're good. We're fine. No problem. Great, 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 great. Now let's think of sophisticated ways to do the same exact thing, right? Now that we isolated that attribute, maybe go in the clock structure and we take something again, like a themed weekend RCS Live, something like this. And we say, hey, this song right here, maybe do a constraint, right? Something like that, where every position has a constraint. Go over here to our constraints, add a brand new one and call this RCS Live. And we'll have a little plus here and we'll say that the content, where is our content? Cannot equal value 1 of the live attribute. And I hit OK. And I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go back to my definition. And I'm going to essentially say that this position right here is the RCS Live constraint, which we know is you cannot be an RCS Live song. Or we do the reverse. I'm not going to save my changes, jump back to constraints here, double click on that RCS Live, moving fast for time purposes here. And I'm going to say it must equal RCS Live value, depending on your music philosophy. Am I a don't do this, don't do this, don't do this? Or are we a modern GSelector programmer? I only want you to do that, right? Notice difference. I always kind of compare it to like 1 plus 3 equals 4, 5 minus 1 equals 4. We both got 4. The answer is still 4. We got there in 2 different directions, right? So boom, there's that clock constraint. You can always do something like that. And that's pretty easy from my perspective because we have the the duplicate clock function. Take your main clocks, duplicate it, put the constraints in, you're done, right? That's it. This must equal this. You don't have to do hour restrictions there. You just say it has to be these type of songs and you call it a day, right? You don't have to have restrictions there because the clock constraint is doing the hour restriction for you based on the specific clock, right? Notice how we're kind of deviating from day parts, which are relatively locked, to individual hours, to individual clocks that are assigned to your hours. We're getting very granular here depending on how you interpret these workflows, right? So that's a great way of using the clock constraints. Then, of course, one of the things that I wish I knew this when I was a PD. I would have done a lot more of this, but I just didn't realize it was here at the time. That's the purpose of these RCS lives. And by the way, if you have a question, you want to ask it, I do have my chat open here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and all that good stuff. And so if you have a question, let me know. That's why they're here. Don't forget the archive, rcsworks.com/rcs-live. And so we have here is the content. Well, what is content? Let's hit a brand new content rule. And you notice I created that RCS live attribute. Again, what is it? Songs that are allowed to play, songs that are not allowed to play. You tell me. But if you notice, we now have days of the week, which behave like day parts, or more specifically with the start time, they behave like hour restrictions. This is where me and the users were going back and forth. Their brains went to hour restrictions. Then, of course, they had to do a mass song change and hour restrictions. And I was saying, well, listen, if you have a particular content rule and it's not by position, it's by everything across the board, then why don't just put a content rule in? You can ignore the hour restrictions, ignore the multi-song changer, and instead you're essentially saying that, let's pretend for a second, it's a Saturday night mix show from 7 to midnight on Saturdays, every Saturday, and I just don't want some songs playing. Actually, better example, because 7 to midnight would still include the day part nights, I would just ban the attribute tempo of 1. Instead, there's a mix show from 9 p.m. to midnight. Now we have to use the hour restrictions, or in the content rule case, we just go and say, all right, so on Saturday at 9 p.m. to 11:59 p.m., right? Make sure that the percentage of this RCS live attribute is 100% and 100%. Something like that. So 100% of the hour must be a RCS live attribute. These are songs that are okay to play during the Saturday night mix show. Or we do the opposite and we say that these are songs that can't play. So the minimum content is 0, the max is 0. So now we're not going clock position by clock position. We're not doing hour restriction by song, the multi-song changer. We're taking the content rule and boom, across the board, we got that down. That makes sense? And then all we do is hit OK on here. Boom, we can save our work over there. And there's our content rule. And all we got to do at that point in time is priority list, right? And again, we have the assignment here. So we can say, based on the day part, what's going on, right? Apply that content rule. So it would be Saturday night, or in this case, RCS live day part. We like to isolate our things. And then we just essentially go over here, back to the definition. I want to make sure we add we'll go to all, and there should be a content. It might be already in here. Boom. Content, somewhere in there. It's content's in there, trust me. And so anyway, we have the content rule that's in there. Now you're going to bug me, right? Let's see, go to a legacy rule. Is it content? Oh, it might be station content. That's why. There's a good little, I'm glad I did that, because there's probably it's a station content, if not mistaken. Where are we here? Station. Take my word for it. It's in there somewhere. It's content. I got to find it here for time purposes, but it's obviously content. It's in there. Content, call it a day. But that's another great example as well, right? And so notice how we have a couple different examples how to get to that same destination, right? That's what we're doing there. And so again, just to review here, if you got a question, this is a last call for questions. But we're talking about the example of isolating songs for specific unique programming. So the example I was given was like a Saturday night mix show, and it's only from like 9 to 12, right? We assign that for a special RCS Live day part that isolates the day part for further control in the goal in the balance section. But what if the day part encompasses different hours or whatever it could be? Oh, did I not enable the checkbox itself? Thank you. I gotta look at that and see. Anyway, so the idea there is, sorry, that was the chat on the sidebar. And so we have here the day part are isolated, the hours are isolated. We have the goals, balance, day part is isolated as well. And then it just depends on how you want to control that. Do this, don't do that. Do things like clock positions. And by the way, if you do the clock positions, I'm not going to save my changes. This could just be a couple. I've had some scenarios of users where it's not exactly everything. It's only one category of songs. So think of a recurrent category that has polarizing songs that you want to sound a little more current during a Saturday night show. So there could be a recurrent category with about 20% of songs that shouldn't technically play because they're older currents or older recurrents than modern recurrents. Well, in that case, if you know me, in my recurrent category is R, well, there's the R. Now I just go put that constraint in, what we did earlier in RCS Live. Here's an R, RCS Live. Duplicate that clock, call it a day, and then boom, just like that. Hey, look at that. We have the same achievement on the list and go from there. So it's just, that's the whole thing. So there's ways of doing this based on what you feel most comfortable doing. So again, just to summarize, control and everything is based on your music philosophy. That's what we're doing here, right? Makes sense? Awesome. So listen, I'll see you in 2 weeks for a brand new product release. It's going to be a great one. I can't wait to show you about that. Enjoy the RCS Live archives. In the meantime, we're going to be out on the road. We've got a bunch of conferences coming up. As I said, IBC over in Europe. That's next week. I'm going to be in Orlando for the college broadcasters. Going to be in Alaska for the Alaska broadcasters and so much more. So thank you for tuning in. Welcome back to the RCS Lives, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.